Welcome back to Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Mark Sullivan. My co-host, Tim Erlander, is unable to be with us this time around. And our honored guest this time is Eric, make sure I get that right, Eric Lucero, right?
Correct.
Okay, who is a state representative from District 30B.
That's correct.
Okay, my memory's not totally shot. Welcome, Eric. Good to have you here.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm sure a lot of people probably don't know you. So can we get you to maybe introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, definitely. Well, my dad was a veteran. He was in the military, in the Army.
Good start.
And I was born in Germany, as a matter of fact, on a U.S. Army base.
Okay.
And I was brought back to Minnesota here when I was about 1 year old. Grew up in New Brighton. Okay. And then while I was in New Brighton, I was going to high school, Spring Lake Park High School. I was an out-of-district student. Okay. Graduated high school and got married at the age of 19. My wife was 18. So, and as a matter of fact, this coming November will be 18-year marriage for us.
Okay, and you're still together.
That's absolutely.
That's
absolutely.
Good. It's way too many marriages at that age don't succeed. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. No, it's been a wonderful time. We got married, before our 20s, and so we spent our entire 20s growing up together. It's been a wonderful time.
That's great.
So my first, after high school, my first professional career was truck driver. So I was actually a Teamster truck driver, drove a truck for about 6 years.
One of them union people.
That's absolutely.
Teamster, yes.
McGlynn's Bakery, you might have heard of them.
Yes.
1919, I believe, is when they were.
Yeah.
And but Krispy Kreme came to town. And the law of supply and demand, they were not able to compete. And Krispy Kreme put McGlynn's Bakery out of business, and then I got laid off. But that was my first time of the market forces, being laid off, losing my job.
Supply and demand, and
that's right.
Including labor, yes.
That's exactly right. But while I was driving the truck, I had been going to school. So the traditional model being you get out of high school, you go into college, and then while you get your education done, then you start your career. But I started the career first and was going to college while I was working.
Okay.
Makes it more difficult, but nevertheless.
Yeah, it can be done. Many have done it.
About the time I got laid off, that was when I had finished a Bachelor of Science in Law Enforcement, and I was just finishing my 2-year degree, Network Design and Development Diploma, so computer networking, IT.
Okay.
And I had a choice in my life. I said, I can either take this job. I was offered a job for $10 an hour, or I could go on unemployment.
Which back then was a halfway decent wage.
It was okay, but...
Now back then being...
this would have been, I got laid off in 2003.
Oh, 2003, okay.
2003.
I was thinking it was a little farther back than that.
And so, but I was faced with that choice, and I said to myself, well, it was a lot of, a decent amount of money, but coming from a professional job as a truck driver.
And trying to support a family. And even back then,
right.
$10 an hour is a little bit of a push trying to support a family.
But as a truck driver, I was making $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
So the equivalent of approximately $20 an hour. And faced with the choice, do I take a job that's worth half as much, or do I go on unemployment? And I said to myself, well, and I would actually make more if I had chosen to go on unemployment, but I chose to get a job at $10 an hour in IT.
Okay.
Because I said to myself, even though I'm going to make half what I was making, it's only going to be for a short time. Because I'm going to start my career in my new field, and it won't be too long before I will meet or match what I was making before, and then well exceed that. And the sooner you start that in the new industry, the better.
And one thing I should point out, too, I know from my own experience with unemployment and eventually going back to work, your self-esteem and self-respect.
That's right.
Considerably higher, because when you're on unemployment, little by little, that self-esteem starts to drop until eventually you just kind of become
That's right.
a slave, actually, a slave of the state after a while.
Dependency.
Right.
Dependency.
And dependency. And even though your poverty level, you don't want to leave it. It's like a narcotic at some point.
It's definitely easier to have a dollar handed to you than it is to work and earn your money.
And I know the times when I finally pushed myself and said, you have to go back to work, and did. Boy, I tell you, the sudden difference in self-esteem, self-respect, just how I felt about myself.
That's right.
Just grew. I mean, I may have been making less money than I did on unemployment, but I actually felt good about myself.
That's right.
at that
Knowing
point.
you weren't
Yes,
dependent on the
yes,
state.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
Well, so
anyway, on with your story.
So started my IT career, and then moved up. I decided to go back to school as I'm working my way up in the field. Went back to school and got a second bachelor's degree, this time in computer forensics.
Okay.
So Bachelor of Science in Computer Forensics.
So far, you're at least one bachelor degree beyond me. Keep going.
And then when I was completing the graduation, this would have been approximately 2007, my professor at the time, he said, Eric, you need to round off this technical with some business. So he encouraged me to go and consider an MBA. So I applied to the Carlson School of Management for my MBA and I was accepted.
Okay.
And so I completed that and graduated with my MBA in 2010. And then after that, so that in and of itself, so that finished. I have a master's degree, I have 2 bachelor degrees, and prior to that I had 2 two-year degrees, and then a technical diploma. So that right there was more than a decade of education.
Okay, time to start putting all these degrees to work.
Well, I was working the whole time.
Okay. Yeah.
This entire time was working, having a full-time career and going to school almost full-time.
And raising a family.
Well, my wife and I don't have any children. We've been trying to have children for most of our marriage, but the Lord has not blessed us with children at this point. But that's okay, because what we've done is we've taken our energies and we've channeled them in. If the Lord isn't going to bless us with our own children for whatever reason, we will use our skills and our energy to help other people and their children. And that's what we've been doing.
Excellent.
But then upon graduation with my master's degree, I had gobs of time. Because as you can imagine, full-time school or near full-time school is a lot of time.
Well, seemingly gobs of time. Someone else might say, okay, I'm filling my time with working, et cetera, et cetera. But when all of a sudden you're used to working, going to school, 16-hour days almost in some cases, I suppose, that just having to do an 8-hour day seems rather light duty.
That's right. So that being the case, I said, what am I going to fill this void with? So I went out, and it was about that time my wife and I were dabbling with some real estate investments. So we started to buy and sell houses, and I said, well, why am I paying an agent to buy and sell houses? So I went out and got a real estate license. So I'm currently a licensed.
Now, are we talking flipping on the houses?
No, not initially. It was buying, fixing up, and then selling. But now what we do is we've changed our model. We're currently buying, fixing up, and renting.
Okay.
And so we have both residential and commercial properties.
Investing then.
Correct.
At this point, yes.
But then eventually did that for a few times, and then I was paying because you cannot do. Even though you own the house, if it's not your primary residence in the state of Minnesota, you are not allowed to work on it yourself. You have to hire a general contractor. And I said, well, I'm not going to pay a general contractor to do this. I'm just going to go out and get my general contractor's license. So I went and did that, so I became a general contractor, allowing me then to be able to work on my own properties.
Which is not an easy task. I know from when I had to get my contractor's license and technology systems, it was not easy.
Many of the fields. And I would consider general contracting and everything involved in building is definitely a trade. And it is not easy. These are very skilled people with a special knowledge set that,
yes,
absolutely.
Yes, no, just not go out and grab a hammer and go for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what are you doing these days with all your spare time?
Well, then after I got the real estate license and got the general contracting, my wife and I said, well, what else can we do to improve and work on the community? And give back?
1 or 2 hours left in each day.
That's right. We found a little bit of time.
We couldn't figure out what to do with this extra time.
So I
you don't own a TV set at all, do you?
In fact, we threw the TV away, and the year that Ronald Reagan died, that was his funeral was one of the last things that we watched on TV. And then my wife had been bugging me for probably a year before that, Eric, let's get rid of the TV. Back when we could still throw TVs away, I actually finally gave in. I picked it up, brought it to the end of the driveway, and got rid of it. So we have not owned a TV. If I'm correct, and that was 2004, that's how long it's been since we've had a TV.
I would love to say you don't know what you're missing, but I'm not sure if that would really be a good statement or not. Right about now.
From the snippets I've seen, there's not a lot.
Some with a lot of what's on TV, no, you're really not missing anything.
Well, what it did is it allowed my wife, we made a conscious choice in our life. Because I'm addicted to TV. I love TV, and I was watching it. On the weekends especially, at least 6 hours a day. And the conscious decision we made was, we are going to live life rather than watch life. Okay. Rather than watch others and suck our life away on the tube, we're going to live it. And that's, in part, what allowed me to continue going on in school, academics, professionally working up the ladder,
Right.
et cetera,
Well, I
et
mean,
cetera.
yeah, you're not spending your time watching TV.
That's right.
Your entertainment comes
That's
in
right.
other areas. So.
Yep. Well, then ran for city council.
Fascinating.
Ran for city
I
council.
don't know if I could do it, but yeah, hey, congratulations.
Well, like I said, I would recommend, and I have recommended to anybody who would even consider it. Absolutely, it'll change your life. The TV's been around for 60, 70, 75 years or so.
50s, late 40s.
For all of human history, there hasn't been a TV. It's not unheard of. Humanity got this far without a television.
Now you do own a radio.
Do have a radio.
You do have a radio. Okay, so you're not living in a complete communication void.
Absolutely
anyway.
not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay, you had me worried there for a few minutes.
But we'll talk radio, learning, current world events, geopolitical events, et cetera, and there's a lot that can be gained from. There's very knowledgeable people on the radio. Absolutely.
And so, what drove you into politics?
Well, that was the next thing that how can we give back?
Okay.
As we're looking around the community, we're seeing. I'm a member of the Generation X. My wife is a Gen Xer. We're right on that borderline between Gen X and the Millennium generation, millennials.
Okay.
And as we look around,
which is a roughly what generation? For those of us my age
Sure.
who can't figure out, past their own.
baby boomers are approximately 46 to 64, 1964.
Right.
Gen X is approximately 65 to 79, which is where I fall in, right on the end of that.
Yeah.
And then the millennial generation is approximately 1980 up to 1999.
Okay.
And so as we're looking around, we're seeing these trends, a continual giving up of individual liberties,
Okay.
a continual central control by government, a usurping from local control as it moves its way up towards national government. We're seeing a continual collectivism, a thought where we all have to agree with groupthink.
It takes a village type of thing.
That's right. And if you
can't
disagree,
raise your own kid anymore. You have to have everyone else's input to do it too.
Well, not only that, and if you don't like it, we will ensure that there's policies in place that make it very difficult for you to go another direction and actually have independent thought.
Well, I mean, such as I know, I think maybe we'll probably be touching a little bit on education in a few minutes. But I know, like with the schools, I've often wondered what came first. Did parents start giving up some of their duties as parenting and turn it over to the school, or did the school say, we're going to take it, and the parents just said, we're going to let you? Somehow, the schools are doing more parenting now than the parents are, and I've actually heard some school administrators and times say, well, the kids would have basically no structure, no nothing in their life if it wasn't for school. I mean, school is actually raising the kids. And I kind of like, what about the parents?
Sure.
And it's kind of like, most of the parents aren't, they're just turning the kids over. They get them home at night, feed them maybe, and hour or two they're playing games or watching TV. I mean, they hardly even see the kids anymore.
Well, I spent, as a student, I spent well over a decade in higher education. Loved it so much, I have been teaching college for the last 7 years. I decided to go back, and I've been teaching academic courses. So my heart is for that next generation. It's for my generation and the generation after me. And you're absolutely right. There was a time in this nation's history where the duty of educating the child was the parents. And their responsibility was to ensure that homework was getting done, curriculum was rigorous, fulfilling their responsibilities and other duties, et cetera, et cetera.
Teaching,
and then they would go,
teaching morals, ethics.
Absolutely. And then the child would go to school, and then they would spend a few hours there to get the next day's lessons
and they fed a breakfast at home, and they may have had lunch at school, but they actually fed them a supper. I mean, they didn't get most of their meals at school.
That's right. Responsibility actually being that of the parents.
Right.
Novel concept.
And what the parents said went. I mean, even as far as education goes.
That's right. And then as time has crept on here, it has slowly reversed. And it's now the responsibility, and it's unfortunate, there's this idea in our culture that the school's responsibility is the child. The child is, and if there's something goes wrong, It's the school's responsibility, not spending enough time. It's never been possible, right? Imagine, I don't care if the classroom is 30, if it's 25, if it's 20, if it's 15. A teacher does not have the ability to spend as much time as is needed and then customize to each individual student's needs.
You can't have 15, 20, 30 kids in a room and give individual attention to all of them. It's physically impossible.
That's right.
And not get anything done.
That's right. The intent is to give a broad overview with an outline, whether it's English, whether it's math, whether it's whatever, to go through a few examples, for example, math, and then you spend one period, maybe 50 minutes in an academic period, but then you spend a couple hours at home doing practice exercises with parents, mom and dad helping, tutors if necessary, etc. But most of that increased learning is going to happen outside of that particular 50-minute class period. But unfortunately, like we said, there's an expectation now that the school district, the teacher raise the child, and that's unfortunate. And like you mentioned, it's now to meals. It became lunches.
The kids go to school. They go to not a daycare, but like a latchkey afterwards. And then eventually the parents pick them up. As I said, they go home.
That's right.
Parents have a couple hours with the kid. Whereas the schools have just spent, between the schools and the latchkey, have spent,
That's right.
10, 11, 12 hours.
That's right.
In some cases.
That's right. And then you're seeing, I think it was this summer.
And the parents can't understand why they're becoming detached or losing, don't have a connection with the kids anymore.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And then I was shocked to hear, so we've heard about the school lunch program, the school breakfast program, but then I heard that there was a program over the summer here with select school districts where now in the off year, in the middle of the summer, they're driving around and feeding students.
They do have a lunch program. I know in Richfield, I know they do have when summer school is in session. It ends at the end of summer school, but where any kid can go in and get a lunch.
That's right.
At the school. I mean,
and what the next
whether
step
they're
is,
going to summer school or not, just go on in. You can get a lunch.
The rate we're going, there's only two things left. It's dinner for the children, and then after that's satisfied, it's going to be feeding the parents, and that's where we're going. And at some point,
no, you just let the parents feed themselves. The kid will just stay at school.
There we go. Okay? There we go. And that's somewhat what we've seen is this trend of, we went from half day. At some point in our nation's history, there wasn't kindergarten at all, right? Then I presume there was a debate that said, let's start kindergarten, but let's not do it all day because there's a value for the children to be with the parents at home. So let's just do it part.
The kids are not mature enough to have that separation from the parents.
That's right. So let's just do it half day. Because we as a state are going to recognize, the importance and value of children with their parents. But then decades go by.
And kindergarten is basically just to get the kids, in a sense, prepped for regular school. Learning to work in groups, learning to work together, follow directions and make sure they know some of the basic take care of themselves things that they need, from tying shoes to basic needs.
Absolutely.
So that by the time they get into a regular school, they are ready to function without having to do this all in beginning of first grade.
Yes. Well, and then we see a couple decades go by. Incrementalism, which is the way the progressive left advances their agenda. Incrementalism occurs, and we move it to all-day kindergarten. Right? And now they didn't even let a couple decades go by. It was just a year or two later, I think it was just a year later, they began the discussion of the universal pre-K.
Universal preschool.
That's right.
And so they want to bring in... The basic idea being, well, this will give the kids a head start so that they will be that much farther ahead when they eventually get through all-day kindergarten and hit school. They'll have this academic head start.
That's their thinking, but it's a fallacy.
Unfortunately, from what I understand, unless I'm wrong, maybe you can correct me on this if I am, that any head start they have at that point is lost. It's gone by the time they hit third grade.
I've heard that,
The kids that do not have the preschool and the ones that have had are pretty much academically the same by the time they hit third grade. So that head start is the benefit of it is lost. But what is unfortunately also lost is a time maturing with the parents, spending time with the parents. You know, a lot of these kids in preschool are not mature enough. They don't have, you know, they're just not emotionally ready to be separated that long from a parent or some kind of a parent figure.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And as far as I'm concerned, you know, the universal preschool is just state-sponsored daycare. You know,
that's exactly right.
Save the parents the money of having to put a kid in daycare.
It's the government involvement at younger and younger ages, separating children from their parents as early as possible in order to begin the government value set indoctrination. Government in general has one value set, collectivism, centralized control, etc., whereas parents have a different value set. And the two, you know, don't necessarily meet. But the sooner they can get the child into the school system, the government system, the sooner they can begin indoctrinating that value set. And that's unfortunate.
And it's not the parents' morals and ethics anymore. It's whatever the teacher or the school system decides the child should have for ethics and morals.
And part of the conversation, you know, it's a hot topic right now, is Common Core. And I've had numerous parents come to me. In fact, Minnesotans Against Common Core, a very active group of very concerned parents regarding the curriculum. It's a continual dumbing down of the standards and the bar. And you're talking about morals.
Yeah, well, when you're talking dumbing down, I mean, the idea originally was so that, you know, the kids with extra, you know, needs, or the slightly underperformers, wouldn't be left behind. So we're going to make sure that they feel good about themselves and can, you know, and kind of get a little bit of a morale boost and a push up. Unfortunately, what it's done is it's taken the standards and say, okay, you want to try and shoot for this up here.
That's right.
Instead of that, it's saying, okay, well, since this person may not make that, we're going to lower the standards and just say, okay, everyone only has to come here.
That's right.
And if people remember from, let's say, like, their Phi-Ed or whatever, when they said, okay, in order to pass, all you have to do is do 15 push-ups. Okay, well, I know myself, all I ever did was, okay, 15. I could have done 5 more. I could have done 10 more. I'm not sure if I do 1 these days, but, you know, I'd only do what was necessary to get by.
Exactly.
You know, and there's going to be a few that will always do more, but most will only do what they have to do to get by, which means everyone's only coming up to this level now. They're not being challenged to come up here.
That's right.
And now we're going to try and move it down, and move the bar down even farther.
That's right.
And just keep moving it down. And so
whenever
it's called dumbing down.
That's right. And whether in the context of education standards, whether in the context of social welfare, whether it's the tax structure that we talk about, that's always the argument on the left, is that we need to lower it down to help the people at the bottom. And whenever that model is tried, we have repeated examples, and it doesn't matter the context. When you have a strata of people, you will always have some at the top. You will always have a top 10%. You will always have a bottom 10%. It doesn't matter what context
Everyone
it is.
is not equal.
That's right. And what they do, but they believe in equal outcome. So they want to use state policy and government force to achieve equal outcomes, not equal opportunities.
Which means we will just have everyone perform at this level rather than try and push them up to this level.
That's right. So when they lower it,
everyone is equal down here.
So when they lower it, so for example, the tax structure, for example, when you increase the punitive of the higher income earners and try and redistribute the wealth to the bottom, all that suffers is it doesn't teach the people on the bottom how to learn a different skill set, how to make lifestyle changes in order to improve. What it does is it just drags down the bottom, and everybody suffers.
And then you have people who don't know history, don't know math, don't know.
Right.
I mean, and that's the norm. And
that's exactly right.
And they may rely on their electronic devices to get by, but what do they do when they don't have those electronic devices?
That's right.
They're lost.
That's right.
You know, they're great. They're really great, but you got to have that knowledge to really fully use it.
That's exactly right. In the context of education, lowering the standards, that's what's happened.
And the next problem with this is the fact that they're taking the control to a higher and higher level of government.
That's right.
Now education is being run out of Washington, you know, and you know the old adage was you want to keep your control as close to home as possible.
That's exactly right.
Because you know I can call up my local city council person and say, okay, you know, I need this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or you're going to lose my vote. Well, this guy, I'm one of 500 people, let's say, that are voting for him. And so he's going to listen and perhaps react.
That's right.
I mean, if I call my guy in Washington and say, I'm not going to vote for you if you don't change this, he's going to laugh because kind of, okay, well, I'll lose you, but I mean, that should be no problem considering I have, you know, 65,000 people voting for me.
The closer to the people, the greater the accountability.
Right.
But what you're also referring to is uniformity and conformity.
Right.
So we have a system here called independent school districts. And I challenge anybody, what does the word independent in the name independent school district XYZ mean? Well, when it was originally put there, it meant they would be independent to choose amongst themselves how best to educate their children, try this, try that, you know, modify this, modify that, to produce the highest quality.
You can't do that anymore.
Then that's why it's uniformity and conformity.
Right.
Meaning the goal of the
One
left
size fits all.
is to have everybody uniform, and then if you deviate at all from that uniformity, you will have sanctions against you or policies will make it very difficult until you conform.
And everyone marches in step
That's
to the
right.
same drummer.
The opposite of the fundamental values of the founding of our country.
Right.
That's right.
And
Liberty and choice.
You're taught that, you know, stay in line. There's no benefit. You know, it's bad to
Uniformity.
try.
Uniformity.
It's bad to think for yourself.
That's right. That's
Okay,
right.
We're getting right down to the end of this. Time has flown here. What one idea would you kind of like to leave us with? We have about a minute left here.
Well, in the context of education, I would just leave this idea, and that is whenever government increases spending, increases their regulation, and removes it further from local, meaning the further up they go
Right.
in terms of nation,
Right. Going up to state, to federal,
the lower the quality gets. So we've tried their model for several decades here of throwing more money at it, lowering the standards, and creating policy from Washington, and we have had nothing but lower and lower quality results. So the thought that we need to do is increase competition, allow freedom and individual, the ability to choose schools, and then that's the only way to increase quality.
Okay, and we're getting ready to wrap it up here, and with that, I am going to say thank you very much for joining us this time, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.